talk about how do these sponsoring professional associations, how can we engage with them and invite them to sponsor? And Vishal, as I understand, you have had some experience with that, so maybe you could start by describing that process.
Right, so I have been talking to the Finnish associations, and again, as Peter said, in a country typically you'll find more than one association. And that seems to be an issue which is not very easily handled. For example, so we have an association of civil engineers, and then we have other initiatives like Kira DG, which is specifically for digital construction. So one of the things that comes out in this kind of discussions is that there are many other similar efforts. So what do we have for the associations? And that we need to clarify early on. So based on our discussion so far, at least one thing we can commit from the EC3 perspective is that we have less bureaucracy. You can have smaller projects, which is immediately that can be started off with SPA's interest. And if you can convince them on a topic, or if they can convince you on a topic which we can immediately start off, that's a good starting point, because at some point, as universities, we have very similar goals with respect to what associations have, which is to lift the country's profile in terms of the construction industry and bring about more computing in there. So as long as we're targeted in our goals, focused on computing side, we can have, I think, tangible projects. So there are two types of points here, which is interesting. One, of course, is short-term projects, which can be for a year or two, which can be directly dealt with associations. And then we can have longer-term objectives where we can start with short-term projects which shows tangible results, and then look forward to larger European projects which could be across associations. So that's my recommendation, start talking with associations.
Yeah, just to add a couple of things also to Vishal's and Peter's comments. In talking to some of these associations, the professional associations, the question that usually comes up is, what can we do for them in return for their sponsorship? And what we promise to give them back is, first of all, an opportunity to define the research agendas of our society, but also the opportunity to be part of something bigger, collaboration between industry and academia, collaboration between research and professionals, and also the opportunity to get first-hand information from the white papers and technical reports that we will produce at their request in terms of the agendas they define. So I think the role of the professional associations and the industry as a whole to this organization is significant, and we look forward to welcoming more professional associations.
And we can now open it up if there are any questions from the audience. Be happy to take them, and I'll repeat them. Do we have any questions from the audience about the EC3, either the governance structure or the ways that industry can be involved? Yeah.
Okay, so I may be a bit ignorant still in this whole thing, so some basic questions for now. So if I come from the industry, I imagine that I can approach your association, and for example, I have employees who want to make a thesis at a university they're studying, and we are looking for a subject. So would that, for example, be a use case that I approach you and ask you guys, so what are there for subjects right now that would be worth doing a thesis for? Is that like something that could happen?
Yeah, I think that could fit into the system as well. So that's one of the channels to look into.
Yeah, in general, so the last slide that I put up there is just mine now. I actually didn't share this with the rest of the board. I cheated a bit. But those topics are kind of still open. The white papers that are produced, you could probably get some master thesis topics out of there, but they're not like listed 1, 2, 3. We might have other formats which also allow you to say these are topics, these are really topics, I mean, apart from the white papers. And I think we could also really even have research proposals or call for proposals where you can see, okay, that's an actual proposal and that sponsoring association is going to fund it, for example. So those are different areas.
Just
just to add a couple of things. For instance, in the morning session, we talked about digital transformation processes. So, for instance, a company from Belgium may want to go through this digital transformation. So they need advice or best practices, lessons learned. So they can reach the organization, and the organization can reach another company or another member in, let's say, Italy, and provide feedback. So we want to be that mediator, in a sense, the facilitator of knowledge change. Okay.
And perhaps I can ask a follow-up question, or? Yeah, okay. Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, then I'll ask one myself, and then we'll come back. Yeah, I think perhaps you can also give your opinions on the ideas for these white papers and what the value would be for the industry participants, and kind of in your mind that the topics or the ways that such white papers will also help move the industry forward, if you have any examples.
The white papers are really important because they give out knowledge that the experts have in a lame language, in a sense. Okay? So we definitely look forward to producing these reports, and I think Vishal may add to this. The committees, the technical committees, are working on this as we speak to produce some of these white papers on, for instance, how to implement BIM, how to educate undergraduate and graduate students on BIM technologies, for instance, things like that. Okay, so I don't know, Vishal.
So I'll probably go to a more specific example just to. So the idea here is that we would like to be a committee which also makes advisory, takes an advisory role, suggests policy decisions. And one area, also one of the objectives of this kind of white papers is also to identify topics which are generally otherwise ad hoc in our processes. For example, think of teaching of standards in an academic program. So how do we actually teach how to use standards, let's say ISO standards? So we leave those as something which is just standalone, and there's no guidelines on how to actually go about teaching them. So as part of the educational committee, our first objective that we have planned for the first couple of years is to take how do we actually incorporate teaching of standards into curriculum, and that would become a white paper by the time we come out with it. So that would be a research topic where the committee and wherever we put in a proposal, if SFAs, SPAs agree with that, then we go ahead with that, and then that would be the topic we'll work on for the first year, and then come out with the white paper. So something of that direction, which becomes useful for the community in general, but also make some tangible recommendations of how we can go about implementing things.
Definitely also want to add, there's a number of white papers already existing, and they are very often national. So I don't know all the national standards, but there's a lot of national documents which are very similar in the different countries. And if you could have like an organization like this which gathers those and makes a European proposal out of that, that would be one of the optional white papers. So there's different, for example, I'm coming from a BIM area, so our country has a number of documents specifying how you should do BIM modeling and how you should do BIM management, etc., etc., etc. We have seen digital twins this morning. We should maybe have a white paper about what it actually is, just thinking out loud. That needs to fit in one of those committees, probably, because it needs to be handled by a committee. And that has also been a bit of a struggle to name those committees, to nail them, to say those three will be it. But I think eventually we have a quite okay model. We have a good model in the sense that we don't confine ourselves to BIM only. So the modeling and standards is in there, but it's also data sensing and analysis, which is a quite different area. And the human data interaction is also a separate area. So we are covering 3 good areas with plenty of topics which you could put in there. In a comparison, for example, with ECPPM, that's very much focused on the modeling. DGIs is a lot more focused on, it has product modeling, but it also has a lot of data sensing in there and simulation. So I think EC3 has an opportunity to have those 3 different topics in there. And the scattered white papers that we have in Europe, we could bring them together. Maybe we should have an easier process to get them together and just host them or something, but that's an option. And they also drive So you were asking, as an industry practitioner, what do I get out of the white papers? They already drive lots of the research as national documents, so it should be fine.
Just to add one part to this is that, so it was a very interesting question because it's not very easy to identify which white papers to work on because there's so much happening around. And that takes quite a bit of time for other committees to agree on what to really work on. So any suggestions or ideas are welcome on that front as well.
Okay. Other questions from the audience or follow-up questions? Okay.
Start also talking. So you talked about the policies. So for example, you have like national standards on modeling. Just taking that example of modeling, and you might be interfacing to get that standard also to other, or even to make it like an EU standard. So, but in a general way, you haven't spoken too much on how you want to bridge from papers to policies, which might be quite challenging. So what's the idea on, not like the final answer, but what kinds of policies? Are we talking about modeling policies, or what are the realistic ones to tackle?
That's a great question, and I think one that our panelists can give good attempts to answer.
Let's give the mic to Peter and let him answer.
Now we'll have a break. I'll just go out for 15 minutes. It's a very good question, how to go into the policy, but that topic has not been the highest on the priority list. How to answer this? So I think there's policy on a national level, like the European standards and national standards. I'm not really sure that's our core aim. There's other bodies doing this, but I mean, we interface with them anyway. I think there's a number of us in standards bodies anyway. So we could use it as a resource in those bodies, but I think it's also policies in the companies themselves saying, okay, we'll use that common practice which is agreed upon by that group and EC3 as an organization in that white paper or that report. That's the way we should do the work. We'll use that internally. I'm not sure that's really a policy. So more like a way of working in a company, that kind of policy. Damn good question, by the way.
Let me give it a try at that. So that I think what we are trying to do is to bring about issues upfront to make it visible, policy recommendations. So that in itself is the first objective. So we are not in a situation where we can really make policies. But what we can do is we can highlight those topics where policy decisions have to be made or improvements have to be made. I think that's a good target to achieve in the first place. Speaking of educational committee, I think it's much easier for me because there we can definitely influence academics at least in terms of how to go about teaching computing, for example. And there we can make those policy recommendations which are easier to implement, which are not necessarily regulatory or coming from governments. And there we can definitely see that these policy recommendations will translate rather easier. Yeah, for the other ones we can make recommendations. Beyond that, we not necessarily see where we can go.
Just to add to that, I think the uniqueness of the EC3 community is that it brings together academics, industry, professional associations into a collective knowledge environment. So if we as a community, with the collective knowledge that we have, can gather, can sit down and look at these problems that we face as a community, we can come up with a better, wiser solution, which can then be transformed to policy. We cannot, of course, enforce these policies, I mean, these white papers, but it's just a guiding light. This is what we aspire to do anyway, for the time being. And the other thing that is important, I think Peter mentioned it, is that the information is too fragmented in Europe. Every country starts from scratch. I mean, in Cyprus, my country, we are now talking about implementing BEAM, and they're trying to reinvent the wheel. Instead of reaching out to a community like EC3 and get the collective knowledge of the countries and the people that implemented BEAM.
Other questions? So I have another one for you. if someone
For which one?
for all of you. So if someone in the room or knows one of these SPAs, supporting professional associations, and they the first step is to talk to Pieter, as he mentioned, to come talk to me. But what is the right way to go about discussing sponsorship, discussing interactions, and presenting the benefits? Because we've also spoken a little bit about the need for the local liaison, someone that knows these associations really well and can be a champion that really pushes within that organization to support, to make us supporting. So what advice, Pieter, do you have? And maybe the others can comment as well.
Shall I answer since I hold the way we approach this is by, first of all, utilizing the members of the committees and the board to reach out to the corresponding national SPAs. And we send them a letter, a 1-2-page letter, outlining, summarizing the benefits of these SPAs for joining the association. And the benefits are, as I said, they have access to the board, the collective knowledge of the board and the community. They have the option to define agendas, research agendas, and they are represented on the board with a person of the association. So they have a direct saying to the board's decisions. That's one of the benefits they have. The other thing is that they are invited, and they have a liaison communicating between the board and the communities themselves. And as I said, they have first access to the knowledge we create. That's one of the things. We try to see some of these organizations in person to explain EC3, and we, for the time being, rely on the committee members to make this first contact, and then we take it from there.
I actually have not that much to add. It's very
Collects the money.
yes. No, it's just a very personal thing too, and it's a very personal conversation which you make with the people you know locally from your organization, and it's to some extent goodwill that they join to see where it gets, but then to return something. We have the 2-page document, for example. There's processes in place, everything is there, but most of all it requires goodwill, which is always personal, so you have to go and talk to people.
And for Peter, we invite them to join the proposals we submit. For instance, the cost proposal that Peter mentioned, these professional associations will be invited to join, and therefore benefit from the possible funding of the proposal. They will get money in return.
Might not be bad to mention also that we have the ICE journal,
yes,
which they're outside in the coffee break room. We have through ICE we have a contract with them to publish white papers.
White papers, conference papers.
In their journal so the journal acts as a means to get the work that comes out of the committees in the IC journal to the UK market, basically. Yes. So that's also.
Yeah, and for people who are anyways in touch with SPAs through your local research, you already probably have identified some pain points where they're interested in getting some support. So it's not, it does take some time initially, but I think it's a matter of getting the conversation on, and after a while they do see the value in being part of this.
Other questions from the audience? Yep. Yeah, I can run it up.
I'm new here, so what I'm about to say may be very, very stupid. But I think the industry-academic relationship would be cemented if we didn't have a separate industry day. I think that the dialogue between the two sides would be better if we were able to mix up the sessions a bit, and that would allow industry to issue challenge questions things that, having presented what they've achieved or whatever, what's next? What are the questions that for them matter? And it will give academics access to at least case studies, if not rigorous material. And I think, I wasn't too sure about the white papers, but I think the idea of generating challenge questions which can then inform the following year's conference, maybe inspire some short-term academic projects. Just when students come along and say, I haven't got a topic, they could say, oh, go to the EC3 website and you'll see 10 topics which were left hanging at the end of last year, and so on. And that can start the conversation and get people involved on both sides of the discussion. Okay, so it's stupid, but I have to say.
Would anyone like to respond?
Yeah, so I think we did our best with the program. James is right behind you. He did the program. He's been mingling it like a million times. I very much agree with the mingling industry with academia and mixing sessions to some extent. Although it's really difficult in a program. So if you have, I like the idea of an industry day which says, okay, this is the entire track, and I think academia should be here. I think academia also is here in the room to some extent, and it should overlap with the rest of the week. We have the technical meetings, which are actually tomorrow in the afternoon, so it's somewhat mixed. But I agree in general. And we also have a thesis in 3 session in the very end of it, which is then those topics which might come up out of white papers. Those are master thesis topics which are presented in a very short time span. 3 minutes. PhDs, but they are research topics in any case. So there's, I think there's a very good attempt of mixing the program in any case. To that extent that it's possible. I think it would be even better, like the last 2 years ago we had the LC3 conference in which we had one event, and industry was in the middle. So we had a bit more overlap, now it's before.
The suggestion is welcome, then we will definitely look into it at the next time.
And especially also the suggestion of the website with topics saying that, and people can like say.
Also propose it.
Good.
Just to add something, just to reverse the problem, the suggestion. We are also looking for the industry, the professionals, to provide us with living labs for what we do. So this collaboration is a two-way collaboration, right? I mean, we provide, let's say, research topics. You provide us with sites and ways to experiment, in a sense. So hopefully through this collaboration, this two-way collaboration, good things will come out.
Yeah, I think I'll just, in that case, add to the suggestion of the putting on the topics on the website and all. I think these are things which we are also considering in the educational committees. What are the delivery modes? How do we actually interact? What kind of interface we have? So these are discussions in progress, I think. These ideas are definitely welcome. And hopefully, I think in 2-3 years, we'll have sorted out some sort of clarity in diversity of mechanisms of interfacing with industry as well as the wider community.
Yeah, I was also thinking, so we had content this morning already. We had a whole number of presentations and coming from industry, and those have been recorded, will be on the website.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, so they will be uploaded on the YouTube channel. Yeah.
Which is directly linked from our site. Yes. So, I mean, so there's, I think we do effort of putting also that material out. There's a number of conferences where we only see the papers coming out, but I think we also would like to have the industry material there, which can be a very useful input for academia, for research.
Any last questions?
Yeah, if I may ask one
Yes, please. A two-way conversation.
Thank you. About this cost proposal that we mentioned before, Peter outlined what a cost proposal is. The aim is basically to allow networking, to allow people to host joint events, workshops, summer schools, conferences, and also to second young researchers to other institutions and companies. Would that be something that the industry people would be interested in? For instance, companies to join this cost proposal and have people come to their offices and work with them for a couple of weeks, and vice versa, send some of the people from the industry to universities to be trained on things. All right, so tomorrow I think we will circulate some of the material so that you can declare your interest in the proposal, and then we will contact you and have you be part of the proposal.
Great. Any final thoughts? I think that's a good one to end on. Good. Then thank you to the three of you for giving your perspective on the EC3. We now have a coffee break, and I encourage you during that break to continue to have conversations around what will the future